My name is Jon Roberts. I was born in New York, so I moved down here and started into the cocaine business.
Jon Roberts went from a petty New York criminal to become one of the Medellin Cartel's biggest cocaine distributors and earned $1,500 per kilo he distributed. In the documentary, Cocaine Cowboys, Roberts is portrayed as a fairly decent guy and comes off as a relatively nice person, but that's not the whole story. In the book, American Desperado, and in an interview in the New York Post, Roberts not only admits to some of the horrible things he has done, he brags about it. He was personal friends with the Ochoa family, who according to Roberts were the real godfathers of the business, not Pablo Escobar, as most people believe. When he was arrested, Roberts became an informant for the FBI and spent most of his sentence outside the prison walls. In his book, American Desperado, the author Evan Wright sheds a different light on Jon Roberts than how he was portrayed in the documentary Cocaine Cowboys. When he was in school, Roberts tortured college students for fun, helped snuff out mob accountant Meyer Lansky's stepson, and admits to brutalizing his ex-girlfriend with a belt when she tried to leave him. In the book, Roberts admits he's a psychopath, and after all the terrible things he has done, he still says he has no regrets. The New York Post asked Roberts in an interview, "So would you call yourself a psychopath?" "Well, that depends on how you define psychopath," Roberts answered. "A lack of empathy or remorse. Well, then I am. I enjoyed my life. How many other people lived a life like that?" This is the real story of Cocaine Cowboy Jon Roberts, one of the Medellin Cartel's biggest cocaine distributors.
Esta es la historia de la cocaína, con Magnus.
In 1955, when Jon Roberts, who was born John Rico Bono in the Bronx, was 7 years old, his father, a made man in the Gambino crime family, took him to New Jersey when a car blocked their passageway on a bridge. "I'll take care of this," his father told him, pulling out a gun. He then pointed the gun through the window and fired 3 shots, killing the driver. This experience would mold Jon Roberts, and he would follow his father's mantra that the evil path is the strong path because evil is stronger than good through his life. When Jon was only 9, his father was deported to Italy, leaving Jon with an abusive mother and stepfather. Soon after becoming a teenager, Jon joined a gang of kids called the Outsiders, who robbed wealthy college students, specializing on the small-time drug dealers on campus, admitting that beating people badly gave him a rush. "We'd strip the guy naked, tie him to a chair and beat him. I didn't say a word, just hit him. It was like having an orgasm. I got high on it. They were weaker, and I was above them." When he was 17, Jon was arrested and charged with attempted murder and kidnapping.
Went to see my uncle, and my uncle took me in. First, he had me collecting money because he was a loan shark. So he put me with one of his guys, who also happened to be the driver for Carlo Gambino. And my uncle said, "Don't worry, this guy will take care of you." Some guy owed my uncle money. We kidnapped him, we threw him in an apartment, and the guy that I used to do it with me was strung out on heroin. I said, "Look, I'm going home to sleep, you watch this guy." Well, he ends up shooting up and ODing, so the guy he's watching just opens the door and walks into the street because my friend's dead on the floor. He ran to the police came and, they got me and they put me in, at that time they had a place called the Tombs in New York, which was one of the original jails.
Roberts was taken to Manhattan's detention center, called the Tombs, and claims that military recruiters offered him an out. "If you join the army, we'll erase your criminal history." Roberts didn't take long and accepted the offer. And it was during his 2 tours in Vietnam that he really became sadistic. In an interview with the New York Post he says, "The first time I killed someone, I was paid by the government. That's a kick." He soon became buddies with a fellow soldier that he claims was even more of a psychopath than himself, and says they called dibs on who got to kill which guy. They cut out Vietnamese soldiers' tongues and genitalia and even skinned them alive, describing the process in grotesque detail, saying, "Eventually the whole body slides out from the skin." After 4 years in Vietnam, Jon was injured in an explosion, saying he was blown out of a tree, and returned to New York with a metal plate in his head. But there are no records of him being in Vietnam or the military, so we have to take his word for it, also having in the back of our minds that psychopaths often brag about things they haven't necessarily done.
And I got involved with a group of Italians from New York. They were actually part of a mafia family. And we opened about 4 or 5 nightclubs that became very big, and we were doing really well. One day, they just came in, the police. We had no idea why they were there, and then they told us that our partner, they had found him out on the Long Island Expressway, and he had been killed, and he had like 11 bullet holes in him. So who knows what happened to him.
But before leaving for Miami, his girlfriend told him she was leaving him. Roberts didn't take this lightly. He tied her up and beat her with a belt for hours, leaving her black and blue and terrified. After moving to Miami with only $800 in his pocket, he got a job as a dog trainer. Well, not training the dogs to sit down, roll over or do other normal dog things, but training them to be attack dogs. Through the man he worked for, he met the man that introduced him to the cocaine business, Albert San Pedro. Starting as a small-time dealer, Roberts quickly showed he excelled at the work. "I have a light shining on me," he told the New York Post.
And Albert would front me a quarter of a pound, and he would give me like 3 or 4 days, and then I would go and bring him the money back, and then he'd give me another quarter of a pound. And I think I used to pay him somewhere around about $800 an ounce or something back in the 70s for it. And it wasn't of any quality, but a lot of people didn't know the difference, and they would see these big rocks and they would think, wow, this is great shit. And my clients weren't these people that you would think they would be, like these street people.
If anybody had cocaine, they had to be an airline pilot.
Real estate people down here.
Doctor or attorneys.
I had lawyers, I had doctors.
Somebody that could afford what it cost.
They were called weekend warriors. During the week, they wouldn't do anything, but on the weekend, they'd just go from Friday night till Sunday and do this stuff. And each guy would introduce me to another friend. So eventually, it went from 4 ounces to 8 ounces to 12 to 16, where within like a month, I was selling probably 2 or 3 kilos a week just to these doctors and friends. When I came from New York, I came down here with $650 in my pocket. And I was making $20,000, $30,000 a week back then just off of this little trade.
Cocaine was the drug of upward social mobility, and this was Jon Roberts' ticket into the upper parts of society. He soon became one of Miami's biggest cocaine dealers. But after a while, the Mexicans who he got the drugs from couldn't supply him with the quantities he needed, and Roberts started to look elsewhere for a new supplier. Through his girlfriend, the model Tony Moody, he was introduced to the photographer Shelton Archer, who had contacts in the Medellin Cartel. It was through him that he met Rafa, the Medellin Cartel's top man in the U.S., and Max Mermelstein, who was married to a cousin of Pablo Escobar.
And we drove to Sunny Isles, Florida. And we go into this house. There was about 5 or 6 Colombians there, all like loaded to bear. When I say loaded, they were strapped. They had pistols, machine guns, and they were all standing around. And at that point, I realized this, this guy's serious. This is for real, because people just don't stand around like that. And I meet this little guy. He can't be more than 5'4", 5'5", and he introduces himself, and he says, "My name is Rafa." And he's telling me, I'll give you whatever you want, man. And if you got some money, I'll front you twice the amount of money that you come with. And I said, well, show me something. He takes me in this back room, he pushes a button, and a whole wall opens up like this, and I had never seen so much cocaine in my entire life, just sitting behind this wall. I said, okay, I guess you can't help me, man. I said, give me a day, and I'll put together the money, and, I'll be back. The next day I came, he had an American guy there, and he introduced this American, and he said, this is my compadre. I'm not in town a lot, but whatever it is you need, this is the man, he'll take care of you, and don't worry about it. He's 100%. And the man he introduced me to happened to be this man, Max Mermelstein.
Roberts now got introduced to Mickey Monday, one of the Medellin Cartel's transporters, and together they met the elite of the cocaine business, among them Fabio Ochoa, the godfather of the business. But they were surprised.
In the beginning, Max was giving me like 75, 100 kilos a week. Eventually, when Max saw I was serious and this was happening every week, when you bring somebody $1 million every week, all of a sudden, you grow, a bond becomes between people. And Max said, I want you to do my end of the business. Going to Colombia, arranging the trips, and you split it with me. You're going to make much more, and you can continue to supply whoever you want. And Max sent me to Colombia.
This is the Envigado section of Medellin. It is here that the cocaine bosses meet.
And I would hook up with Rafa, and Rafa would introduce me to the people he was working with.
We met, you might say, the elite of the drug business from Colombia.
And it would be the Ochoas.
This was Pablo Escobar.
People that you read about in books.
Of course, later.
You know, here I was, a kid from New York, never thinking that this would really happen.
They make it sound like they had, you know, an office the size of this with computers, and they got 40 secretaries. It's just a bunch of bums down there. There were a bunch of street thugs that got lucky.
Roberts and Munday now established smuggling routes from Colombia, using planes, boats, tow truck companies, safe houses, and airstrips, and in this way setting up an effective transportation route for the cartel. Munday would fly the cocaine to the U.S. and Roberts would distribute it to the dealers. The cartel paid them $3,000 for each kilo they transported, making them earn millions of dollars in a very short time. Munday and Roberts soon became one of the Medellin's biggest cocaine smugglers and distributors. And unlike what most people believe, it wasn't Pablo Escobar who were the boss of the cocaine business.
There was only one family at that time that I knew, and that family was from Medellin.
The Ochoa family was a highly respected family of ranchers with a great deal of influence in their home city of Medellin, Colombia.
So they have, of course, the captain and the head, the capo, which was, as many people want to believe that Pablo Escobar was the king of cocaine and everything, they can believe that. But the man that was really the king was Ochoa. And not Favito, the poor man, it was the old man. The old man was the silent man who never did a day in jail, who really controlled Escobar.
Fabio Ochoa, the patriarch of the Ochoa family of the Medellin Cartel.
They are credited with having created a Lloyd's of London for the cocaine trade in Colombia.
Rafa was like a lieutenant, and Rafa really controlled almost every kilo of coke that came into this country through the people from Medellin. Rafa knew it was coming, and Rafa knew who was getting it and how much they were getting for each one. And he made these people, I can't even be, I mean, you know, millions isn't enough, because millions isn't what he made these people. There was nobody higher than him for the Medellin Cartel in this country.
It became so successful that Roberts and Munday built their own runway and made hangars out of barns at a farm for their plane. They put up a sophisticated network, having drivers, lookouts, and bribing the necessary police and people.
We built 2 runways there, put up a couple barns that were really hangars. They looked like barns. But when you'd open up the hayloft door, you would see that it was shaped to the tail of an airplane, if you would. I would use a 5, 6, 8-year-old family car.
And we would load 300 pieces, and we would put air shocks on a car so that the car wouldn't fall to the ground.
And we would use a tow truck to tow the vehicle back.
We had a towing company that we formed, and we bought a gas station, a garage down here in Miami.
And the guy in the tow truck would have a work order.
We had a driver who obviously knew what was going on, but was told, you get pulled over and they open the trunk of the car. You know, you don't know.
If you're driving the vehicle, it's kind of hard not to know what's in the trunk. Well, the guy in the tow truck don't know.
You don't know. You're contracted to tow the car, man.
He hooked up and away he went.
Let him take the car and let him take you down there, but they can't hold you. You got the bill here and everything. And we would get a caravan with 2, 3 cars going. We would use one car in front as a spotter and one car behind. They would bring him into Miami. And we did that for 6, 7 years. Never had one little problem at all.
Living a life that most people would only dream about, the pair soon got invited into the elite of rich people in America. According to Roberts, he didn't only supply the Pittsburgh Steelers with cocaine before their Super Bowl final, which they won, he claims also to have provided O.J. Simpson with cocaine. John continues, during that time, anything was possible in my world. I went from being the coke guy, to the rich coke guy, to just the rich guy.
I had 3 cigarettes hanging in the backyard, 2 cougars, I had mountain lions living in my house, a helicopter in my backyard. And I used to fly with the helicopter to the racetrack. Everybody else was driving in cars. I'd land to see my horses run in the helicopter for like an hour and then go back home. I had 40, 50 horses at a time, racehorses.
Oh, my God, he's had terrific racehorses.
Do you know what they cost a month to feed? $50,000 a month just to feed them.
You didn't care what it cost because you had money in your pocket. People went out and partied.
We saw best of all clubs was definitely the Mutiny in Coconut Grove. It catered almost exclusively to the drug traffic.
If you were in that trade, you had the money. You could entertain people. lavishly.
I mean, we used to go into restaurants.
To dinner at Arturo's or the Palm or Joe's Stone Crabs.
At that time, the Forge was the best restaurant. They would just give us the back room at the Forge and just close the whole back room down. And, you know, you could spend $20,000 in a night there, and we would destroy the walls, and here's the money. Whatever we did, fix it up. It was like waste. It was like nothing, the money.
And John liked to go out to the ladies' bars.
It was nothing to spend $5,000 in a strip joint. I mean, you're talking about not one night. You're talking about 3-4 nights a week. And I tell my friend, you see that girl there? I guarantee I can get her to have sex with me tonight. And he would say, there's no way. She don't want to look at me and have sex. And I tell her, how much do you need to have sex with this guy tonight? She said, I'm not doing that. You're not doing it? Here's 500. I'm not doing it. Here's 1,000. You're not doing it? Here's 2,000. Eventually, like I said, she'd break down, $2,000, $3,000. I'll have sex. And the guy would be like, you know, they'd be shaking. They couldn't understand how you do all this. I still believe it now, even though maybe Miami's changed. Everybody had a price. Everybody does have a price. There are very few people that don't. You could start as high as Noriega in Panama, and you could go all the way down to city managers, to police departments. At that time, we were working with Noriega in Panama.
General Noriega's country is a mecca for drug money laundering.
So the money would be put on one of our planes, and we would fly the plane from here to Noriega's people.
He allowed them to use the airport for landing.
Because we would never send a plane with less than $10 million.
Unlimited amounts of money may be brought into and out of the country with no reporting requirements, and money laundering is not a crime.
The money would be taken off there by the Army, and the Army would take it to a bank, and we were partners in the bank with Noriega. And they set up accounts, and you had an account, and you just, whatever you wanted, you wrote a check for it.
Jon Roberts' downfall started with Max Mermelstein being arrested in 1985. Mermelstein was implicated by a California trafficker, who gave information to the DEA in return for a lighter sentence. This trafficker was busted in a 25-kilo cocaine sting, along with John DeLorean, the creator of the DeLorean car, made famous by the movie Back to the Future.
Max getting in trouble. That was the beginning of the end.
He knew he had a problem. He should have smoked it, but he didn't. He didn't think it was coming to him.
Max calls me up, and he said, I think I got some heat. I'm getting in my car, and I'm going for a ride. You stay on the cell phone with me. Okay, Max, I'll stay on the phone with you.
So Max gets in his car and drives out.
He gets out of his driveway. He says, uh-oh, they're coming from every direction.
I knew I was under surveillance. The marked cars blocked off my path, and the next thing I know, I had 40 guns pointing at me.
End of the conversation.
And they arrested him. That was the last we saw of Max.
I got like millions of dollars buried in garbage bags in my lawn. That night, I'm out there with a flashlight digging up bags of money because I'm afraid they're coming. And I lived on the Everglades. I jumped in a canoe I had with like, I'm not exaggerating, $6 to $8 million, threw it in the canoe, paddled to the other side, and buried it in the Everglades, thinking they're coming to my house. Nobody came, nothing happened.
Nobody thought there was going to be any problem.
Mickey and everybody said, well, I haven't seen any problems when the last plane that landed, you know, everything seemed to be fine. I said, okay, well, then let's just keep going until we find out.
John said there was no reason to be worried. We thought John was so smart.
Mermelstein quickly flipped and turned state witness against the Medellin Cartel.
I remember September 20th for the simple reason that I couldn't sleep. At that particular night, I was working with Mickey and his crew. And because I couldn't sleep, I decided that I would go to a radio room that we had set up here in Miami to monitor the incoming planes.
It was a regular trip. The only thing that was unusual, and it should have given away, it was real quiet on the radio. Of course, they know that we listen to everything.
To tell you the truth, I looked around when I drove up because I was still paranoid from Max, and I saw nothing. Nothing at all.
Everything went as usual.
The plane landed. I said, oh, man, another good trip. I'm going home. I feel great.
And as soon as the airplane landed, went in the barn, they showed up in helicopters, and all kinds of people jumped out with guns everywhere.
I heard a noise. It was like the place was hit with lightning or thunder.
And the guys that were in the airplane, they all ran.
And they just drove this truck probably 60 miles an hour through the front door.
It was a simultaneous bus, Tampa with Miami.
They came in there all in black and with these night goggles and masks. And it was like, I said, what am I, back in Vietnam here? Well, you know, this is nuts.
I went out the back door.
Like, what am I going to shoot it out with you guys?
A small confrontation with one of the guys.
Get on the floor and shut up. Yeah, all right. And they looked at me at first, and I'll never forget, Roberts, what are you doing here? I said, I guess I fucked up, huh? He said, you fucked up, man. We would have come to your house later, but what are you doing? You made it easy for us. I couldn't sleep, man. He said, well, it's too bad.
By some stroke of luck, the feds allowed Roberts to post a $10 million bail, enabling him to skip town and flee to Colombia and then later to Mexico. He ended up in a Mexican jail shortly after a woman, who according to Roberts was jealous that he was sleeping with her sister, saw him on Mexico's version of America's Most Wanted. He was arrested and spent 11 months trying to avoid extradition to the U.S., before he was sent back. According to the documentary Cocaine Cowboys, Roberts spent 11 years in jail in America. But Wright, who vetted Roberts' story, says that he spent 5 years on the lam and only 3 years in jail, because of his cooperation that helped convict other people in the drug world, something Roberts quite clearly expressed he detested about Max Mermelstein.
The next day I came, he had an American guy there, and he introduced this American. He said, this is my compadre. You know, I'm not in town a lot, but whatever it is you need, this is the man. He'll take care of you, and don't worry about it. He's 100%. And the man he introduced me to happened to be this man, Max Mermelstein.
But in the end, he was no better than what he detested himself. At the height of his trafficking business, Roberts brought in and distributed 4 tons of cocaine a month to America. The FBI say that Roberts smuggled in $2 billion worth of cocaine, but other estimates put this figure at as much as $16 billion. Roberts couldn't tell you exactly how much, but he did say, I had built an empire. And that was the most defining thing I've ever done. That's what gave me the greatest feeling. I went from robbing people to making $3 to $5 million a trip. I don't have any regrets. When the writer of Roberts' book, American Desperado, was asked why his descriptions in the book are so detailed, he says, in a lot of other books, they take these monstrous people and they edit down and shave off the rough edges. He then adds, I tried to render him as accurately as possible, as the frightening, monstrous person he is. My portrait of a sociopath through John shows that people aren't all one way or another, Wright said. He has a grain of humanity. Before he adds, and that ability to transform into a charming guy, is what was most scary about him. I hope you found this presentation interesting, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and please check out my other videos on this channel to see if there are other topics you find interesting. And I hope to see you in the next one.